what is the problem? Well, the problem is I used to look like this, and now I look even worse than this. I'm 5 years older than when I first created this slide. What has happened in between is I've gone from a state of fairly good health to declining health. As much as I would like to pretend I am healthy as I used to be, I am certainly not. And that is very clear for pretty much anybody who has been doing this for living for over 50 years. So as Oliver in the long-winded introduction, I better put that down, mentioned, I've got a little bit of a history. 20 years ago, I started being interested in aging and the Methuselah Foundation. And that was when thinking about doing anything about aging was a fantasy, and people were, lambasted for even considering it. Now it's in vogue, and of course, there's a lot of money involved. So there's a lot of people, all the feeding frenzy has begun, but it's 20 years later. And really, I don't think we are all that closer to doing anything. And so I would like to just, talk about a little bit about the fact that, I'm at 54, I'm here. At 59, I'm here. So for me personally, when I started studying aging, I was below 40. I am now coming up on 60. This is not a good look. This is not a good look, and exponentially increasing disease. So I am very, very focused on, and very selfishly focused on my own health. And I realize that that is the true wealth. I've been very lucky in my life to have a family and a father who worked his butt off to give me everything that I needed and support that I needed in order to move in this direction. And I would also like to do something for my parents, which is not something I actually hear too much about from the community. I think most people have written their parents' chances off. That's kind of too bad. So anyway, changes at the molecular level predispose us to all sorts of diseases as we get older. And those molecular changes seem to, accelerate, or at least the phenotypes and the degeneration associated with those molecular changes seems to become visible, like rust. You start to see the bubbling of the paint long after the rust has been accumulating. But, there have been some interventions. They work a little, not a lot. One of them, for instance, is rapamycin. 2009, they showed that, it extended healthy lifespan in mammals. And that should have been an icebreaker. There should have been all sorts of, press releases and pom-pom shaking, but that didn't happen. And it's been 12 years since this result has been, and it hasn't actually been tried and analyzed in humans properly until Ageless RX. As far as I know, they're the only entity, including the NIH, that has actually done and wanted to do proper studies in humans as to the effects of rapamycin. And there are many reasons why there's a delay, but suffice to say that this is in the intervening 12 years since this result was first discovered, many, many people have suffered and many, many people have died who could have been helped. And that's pretty much for my position. So as a cancer patient laying in my hospital bed in a room with men screaming at night for Ativan with night terrors, I was thinking, why is this, desperation of so many people in so many hospitals and around the world who, if they're lucky to even be in a hospital, why is the desperation and suffering of so many people not being translated into actual therapy? It's an immense amount of energy. If it's like kinetic energy, if you could measure it with joules, it would be a tremendous source of fuel. And so I started to think about, well, we're talking about technology development, and what is the cycle, the speed at which technologies are generated? And basically, this is a very generic kind of case that I thought about. You know, you have a problem, you want to go to a solution, has to take an action. That action requires some resources, and then the solution also requires resources. And the solution, the output of the solution, then goes into a research cycle. So it's a cycle within a cycle. And the most critical component of this cycle, of course, is the data from the effect of the action. But then overall, this is the research cycle: hypothesis generation, insights, analysis, and pretty reasonable, pretty obvious. But for some reason, the amount of energy that is available for solving interventions in aging is just not being used properly. I don't know where it's going. Where's all the energy going? Where's all the suffering going? Is it just heat being dissipated into the atmosphere and into the ether? So making it a little bit more specialized case, I took that sort of diagram and applied sort of research, intervention research principles to it. So we still have, a problem that wants to go to a solution. You're in healthy state 1 and you want to go to state 2. In order to go to state 2, you have to take some sort of action. That action almost always requires, spending money on something. And that money actually, hopefully, produces profit. But all of this application of the intervention, then we need to produce samples, and those samples then feed into the ideation or the research cycle, which, as you might assume, involves assaying the samples, producing data, and then extracting insights from the data, which then lead to the next action that can be taken so that you wind up with this development cycle. And when you simplify this, you actually get this. So I had to simplify it for my own sanity as well. So, but the whole point of this is that their suffering is the intelligence that drives this cycle. There's no reason for this cycle to actually spin if there is no suffering. And so every action that's taken in advancing the cycle from point to point uses energy from the suffering of individuals to make it rotate. The most important, of course, component of the cycle is data, because if you don't have new data, it is, you can have the best intelligence, the best sample taking, best assays, but if you don't actually produce high quality data, you can't generate insight and you'll never get to intervention. So I decided to focus on generating data. So data can be generated within human relevant data, can be generated from clinical trials, or it can be generated in academic institutions. That's pretty much how high volume, big data is produced. And that data is hoarded, it's siloed, it's not accurate, it's like there's a whole bunch of problems with it for the most part. So I thought, well, we'll just start from scratch. And so we'll actually have apply interventions ourselves to our health, exercise, diet, environmental. We'll produce our own samples, saliva, urine, blood, tissue. We'll decide what we want assayed on it, and we will produce our own data. The data will then be analyzed. We can then provide it to others. We can do it ourselves. And we will eventually, I think, get to the analysis, which will lead us to better intervention and more time. So right now, the one cycle, I think everybody knows, 15 years or $15 billion, that's basically what it takes to execute one HERT, basically. That's not good enough. So we actually have to have input of money, and that can drive things faster. But if everybody's just making money off of development without actually caring whether or not the cycle completes and gets to the next intervention, then it's kind of a futile cycle. And the customer is never served in that respect either. So the most important aspect of this cycle is that we need to minimize its time, and we need to speed it up. Any decision that can be made that can speed things up should be encouraged. Any decision that is made that can delay its should be discouraged. And that comes from a cancer survivor's perspective, who's, anybody, the customer who wants to go from a state of less health to more health, they don't want it to take forever. They want it to be as quick as possible. And, they'll almost spend as much money as they possibly can. I know, when I had cancer, you would spend the rest, you would mortgage the next 30, 40 years of your life, basically. I would take out a loan and pay it back if I could live. So it's a pretty big survival instinct, at least for me. I'm more skeptical as to the level of the survival instinct of most of the people I meet these days. So how do we take, for me, this is the goal. It's speeding the cycle up. Individual interventions come and go. There's lots on the table. They're not being properly studied. How do we create a system for actually developing interventions as quickly as possible? And for that, you can split up the cycle and you can say, okay, well, we have these types of functions made by these types of professionals, at each part of the cycle is necessary. And you can either aspire to do this all with one umbrella like Calico and do as much as they've been able to do, or you can potentially go out and find individuals and entities who are as interested in intervention development and minimizing time as you are. And if we find entities and individuals that wish to collaborate in an ecosystem and plug themselves in and work together, we will find ways to work together. We will find ways to get around the regulatory or work with the regulatory. But it all comes from the intelligence. It all comes from an awareness that we are on the chopping block. Our parents are on the chopping block. That time is the true enemy here, and disease and death are the real enemies. And collaboration and speeding things up as much as possible should be our top priority. I understand there's lots of details, but if you get the customer on your side, a lot of those details tend to solve themselves. So I decided to create OpenCures, which, as you heard, basically it just helps normal people. I call them self-directed researchers. I've had discussions with IRBs as to whether or not individuals are competent to do research on their own health. And I think this brings up Oliver's earlier point. But there is also a constitutional right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, or something like that, I think. And I think that constitutional right is being abrogated by regulatory, which purports to protect but actually prevent. That is not, and we need to correct that. So one of the guys that I'm working with, as you just heard, is Mike. And I'm thrilled to see the progress that he's making with CureDAO. I think CureDAO is an opening for individuals all over the world to begin to access the kinds of technologies that are normally reserved for clinical trials and academia. And we can create a biomedical data storage platform together. So it's an open source thing. So we're actually building OpenCures, and a lot of the technology that we're building to help people is being built with open source code. Vincenzo Domina, I met him over a year and a half ago at a Forever Healthy meetup, and the guy has been an amazing resource. He is determined, dedicated, and competent, and I look forward to helping and watching him, explode over the next few years in this field. What does OpenCures do? Well, one of the things we do, we actually have a physical location here in Nevada where I'm actually sitting, and people can come in and they can get their blood taken, and we actually, if I can maybe even show it to you. So here's the chair, and this is our little phlebotomy room. And right now, so I may actually have a customer coming in shortly, so I might have to step away. But so we do biobanking, personalized biobanking. We send out those samples for analysis to multiple CROs for mass spec analysis or various other We have partnerships with doctors and Quest and LabCorp, where we can actually measure any biomarkers from almost any angle. And we've developed, and Vincenzo has largely been responsible for developing the OpenCures platform, which I thought I had, which I'm going to switch actually to right now. So if you go to OpenCures, you can sign up and take a look at this, this still late alpha, I guess, version, but potentially early beta. But you can sign in. I have a relationship with a CRO called Prodrome Sciences. They measure people's blood and do metabolomics. And I can show you my data to some degree and my dashboard. So for instance, over the past year, I have been measuring my phospholipids very often, phosphatidylcholine, plasmalogen, various other ones that are really critical for long-term health and cell membrane function. And I was, if you can see, like really in a bad way here. These are the starting values, but I have managed now to raise my levels, and I've been tracking them as well. And so I have a ton of these analysis already in the bag, and we can actually establish now experiments. So as a community, individuals can come together to form experiments. And those experiments, we're actually doing B2B. We're working with Ageless RX right now on the Pearl trial for rapamycin for longevity. And we're doing some work there. But there's a bunch of other types of trials which you could actually set up as well. And we're working with Mike Finn and the PureDAO. So a lot of the functionality that you're seeing here is going to be modularized and available. We're going to make the platform white labeled so that anybody anywhere will be able to use it and put their own branding and marketing and modularize the features. And that's really what we need to do. We need to capture scientific knowledge, scientific expertise, and help people so that they don't have to recreate the wheel when they want to develop products and services that depend on the basic, really high quality science. So lately, since last November, interestingly, I come across Peter Schramek, who many people have met. And he runs something called the LongevityTech.Fund. And they are interested in building an ecosystem of related companies and partners who sort of fulfill many of the functions of the cycle that I was just referring to. And when I talked to him about that vision and the vision of minimizing time by having a well-functioning, well-oiled ecosystem, it was a natural. And so we're joining forces with them. We're going to combine an awful lot of the work that we've done and continue into a company called HL.Data, or Healthy Longevity Data. And we're going to continue to work with them to establish connectivity, become basically a nervous system for their family of companies. But this family of companies is not going to be limited to just those within the LongevityTech.Fund family, but it's going to be available to external entities as well. So pretty much almost done, except I just wanted to say again, from minimizing time is the most important thing for me, for my parents, and for the people currently suffering, and for the people who are going to suffer in the future. And I'd like to really address time as the variable that needs to be minimized from a mathematical, almost engineering perspective. And can we analyze the development cycle and look at the different variables in terms, the mathematical terms, and say, okay, how can we make things more efficient? And I guess there's a way we could actually call it warp speed development of intervention in aging. We do this by putting the customer first, putting them in charge of the development of the interventions that they want, and that can be done through PureDAO, cryptocurrency, various other mechanisms, but basically putting the customer in charge of their data is the means for that to happen. All of the entities that I see emerging from the longevity community space that want to do something to try to cure aging and age-related diseases. We need to work together. I just, that's just the way it is. There's no way that we have a hope in hell of doing anything about aging in my lifetime if we do not work together. So to that end, I would love to generate enough multi-input data from individuals, from people, from humans, and create an in silico prediction model for human health so that we do not need to use humans in at least phase 1, phase 2 kinds of clinical trials. And we were able to test many millions of hypotheses in parallel to get to the ones that have the highest probability of actually working. Another thing is quit rewarding delay. Quit help. We need to change some of our systems on how do people get rewarded for becoming involved in development of health technologies. Right now, customers rarely served. Nobody's making money off of interventions, sales of interventions, products and services to individuals. There's a lot of money, but it seems to be just passed around between investors. And I don't mind that at all in terms of, but we need intervention. So one of the ways to do that is to, again, focus on open source, establish standards for storing and managing and sharing data so that those entities that actually do want to share data and collaborate actually have the means to. And just opening the space up, trying not to make money off of small things, but actually keep our eye on the prize, which is the health that is the true wealth, and making money off of actually reducing suffering instead of just rearranging the deck chairs for the Titanic. So this is pretty obvious to everybody. I'm probably not, I'm not saying anything anybody needs or doesn't already know, but I'm happy to take questions